and these laws set limits, albeit generous ones, on the ways one can think about life elsewhere. Since we, the authors, are professors of physics, JT, and astronomy, MS, respectively, we have observed those limits carefully in what follows. Yet, the amazing thing is the number of wildly different scenarios we can imagine playing out, even within the limits set by those laws. In the first 5 chapters of this book, we lay out the basic procedures that guide our general investigations into the nature of life. We look at the fraught problem of defining what we mean by life, Chapter 3, followed by a discussion of the rules of the game in the origin and evolution of life, Chapter 4. Then, in Chapter 5, we begin an investigation of the rather difficult task that scientists face when they try to detect the presence of life on a distant planet. At this point, we move into a mode that requires a lot of imagination as well as some knowledge of basic science. We look at typical exoplanets and try to figure out how the basic rules that govern the development of life would operate in the environment of each one. We ask how, where, and which sorts of life might develop on those exo-worlds, and then we speculate about how an advanced technological civilization might come into existence there. At the end of the chapters in this part of the book, you'll encounter conversational sections labeled Mike and Jim, names we picked for obvious reasons. In each one, we imagine that the world we just described has developed not only life, but sophisticated technology. Each conversation presents tongue-in-cheek arguments as we try to prove and disprove that the kind of life on the exoplanet we've just visited must be the only kind of life that could possibly exist in the universe. This exercise is an homage to the great science fiction writer Isaac Asimov and his 1941 novella, Nightfall, which is set on an imaginary planet in a system with 6 stars. At one point in the story, a group of astronomers consider the possibility of a planet circling a single star and conclude that life in such an environment would be impossible. After all, it would be dark half the time. In the same spirit, the Mike and Jim conversations can be thought of as pleas for open-mindedness in dealing with the possibilities of life elsewhere. During our tour of the exoplanets, we focus primarily on life like us. That is, life as it is on our planet, based on the chemistry of molecules containing carbon atoms. In Chapter 15, however, we expand our search. First, we consider what we call life that is not like us. That is, life that's still based on chemistry, but not necessarily the chemistry of molecules containing carbon atoms. Finally, in Chapter 16, we pull out all the stops and imagine what we call life that is really not like us. That is, life that's not based on chemistry at all. We find that as we travel farther and farther afield from our familiar world, and as the scientific bases for our discussion become more and more tenuous, the more we must think about scenarios that could be drawn from science fiction. Before we continue, we should say a word about our use of units. When we quote numbers, our purpose is to give the listener a general sense of the size of the objects, planets, stars, etc., under discussion. Consequently, we present all weights and measures in the English system, followed by an approximate equivalent in metric units. We should also offer a few thanks before we begin our voyage out beyond Earth's atmosphere.